Hey everyone, welcome back. This is a very, very special episode. And to make this even more special, I've got Dorie Clark here with me. It's my 500th episode. And so I hope you stick around and listen to it. I can't believe that I've stuck with this this long, over a decade. And without any further delay, I'm now going to formally introduce this episode. Today, I'm recording my 500th podcast episode. What began more than a decade ago has had many twists and turns, witnessed and, dare I say, even encouraged by someone I deeply admire, author, speaker, and longtime supporter of my work, Dorie Clark. In honor of this milestone and our long friendship, she's agreed to be the guest host as we dive into this interview. Now, over the past 15 plus years, my business has evolved in ways I just never could have predicted. I started as a hopeful, recognized networking expert, became a virtual event design consultant and executive Zoom producer during the pandemic, and eventually stepped into a role that Dorie suggested to me back in 2018, book launch coach. At the time, I just didn't take the idea very seriously, but by 2024, it became very clear that this is the work that I was meant to do. Today, I support entrepreneurial authors not only with the logistics of their book launch, but also with the strategic thinking that happens long before they start writing. My newest offer, the Author ROI Lab, helps authors decide whether the book they're considering is even worth all that effort and how to ensure it delivers real business results. From building launch teams and collecting 50 or more Amazon reviews to designing virtual launch parties that turn readers into prospects, my work centers on helping authors turn their books into strategic business assets. Along the way, I built out an author resource ecosystem, this podcast, the Biz Book Pub Hub community networking events, the curated expert directory, Kindle flash sales, and of course, my fourth book on book launch strategy. There is a lot to talk about, and no one better to guide the conversation than Dorie Clark. Dorie, I am so glad you're here. Take it away.
Hey, Robbie, thank you for having me on as your guest host. And I'm excited to be your interlocutor because I have lots of questions. So, I wrote the book, Reinventing You, but you are sort of this paragon of reinvention. You have done it so many times, from starting out as a networking expert and a business coach. And then during the pandemic, when networking was pretty much entirely virtual, becoming a Zoom producer. Now you're doing the business book launches. So walk me through the through line. Like, how some people might look at that and say, wow, that's a lot of different things. But tell me how you see that internally. How do the pieces connect to each other?
I was hanging out with Tamsin Webster, author of The Red Thread, at an annual conference of speakers. And we've known each other a long time. I actually supported her book launch many moons ago, back when I was resisting being a book launch strategist. And she asked me, so like, what holds us all together? And this is like the thing she's really known for. And I remember looking at her and thinking, ooh, now that you're the one asking, I just don't know that I like my answer. Like, I was very hesitant. And she paused and she said, be seen and be heard. And then she started to catalog all the ways I do that. I do that whether I'm teaching people how to network more effectively and be seen and heard within their network, when I'm coaching entrepreneurs about how to get visibility for their new service or offering, when I'm designing virtual events. So I make sure the people in the room feel seen and heard, as well as the presenter is able to communicate their content effectively. And of course, now with the authors, helping them make sure their book isn't just a product that is gathering dust, digital or otherwise, but is effectively used to be seen and heard and attract the right people in. And so the through line has been that, and sort of coupled with that is the idea of just relationships that convert. I'm all about, and you know this, like from the very beginning, I was looking for an audience for the skill I had around relationship building, but it's the networking and the cultivating connections and the coaching people and seeing the results they get when they tap into and wake up their existing network. Like, that's sort of the pathway for me. And I think the challenge has been how to communicate that through line in my own like narrative. But to me, looking back, it really does still make sense.
I love it. And, just to to harken back to one of your previous identities you were known for. I told my wife that I was going to be interviewing you today, and she said, "Oh, I just talked about Robbie on a podcast." And so she was interviewed on a podcast by a guy named Harsha Boralesa, who is a fellow member of the Recognized Expert community. And I don't exactly know how it came up, but she was citing you and your bagels and croissants theory of networking. So
which you helped elevate. I was so mad that I didn't have a book when you were touring around talking about your book that you'd interviewed me and mentioned me in kindly, Standout, and you kept talking about my concept, and I was like, man, if I had just timed that a little bit better, it would have been my entire book promotion. But yes, I did find that was the origin, really, and you were the ones who convinced me that I could title the book Croissants versus Bagels, because I was like, can I call it that? So thank you for giving me direction.
I mean, absolutely, and I guess building on that and things I've told you to do.
Which are many.
Back, so I didn't remember exactly the when or the how, but so you've just reminded me that in 2018 I had encouraged you to look into becoming a business book coach, because that I thought that was a thing that you had a unique perspective on and could potentially help a lot of other people with. And so I guess it took 6 years to germinate. So tell me about that process. Why was that not so appealing in 2018, and what changed over that period of time? How did that somehow start to make sense?
I wanted to be known as a recognized networking expert. I just had a singular focus and a singular identity in mind, and I was working on that, and I was following all your best practices, and I was building up all the milestones and accolades and measurable ways to be seen and perceived that way. And I'm part of the National Speakers Association. I belong to a local chapter. They were doing an auction every year, and I would donate information about how to launch a book, because when I launched my book in 2017, I did, as a thank you, a little master class for my launch team, which people really liked and kept asking me for. And so people would stand up at this chapter meeting and give testimony about either me working with them directly or being on my launch team, and just what a different experience it was. And so people would bid and they would book me. And that's how I ended up working with Tamsin Webster, actually. And so 2017 it happens, 2018 it happens, 2019 it happens. And I find out in 2019 that my chapter thinks that what I'm doing is books. And what I want to be doing is being paid to be a networking speaker. And so I just felt very sort of like demoralized, because like my branding wasn't working. So what changed was the pandemic made me realize that I could be a multi-passionate entrepreneur who had perceived expertise in multiple areas. And in fact, when you've achieved expertise over a decade, it took me to like first get that initial recognition. It was really easy to transfer that expertise to another area, even a really kind of disparate space. In some people's minds, in my mind, they were both about engagement and communication, whether it was in person or on Zoom. And so I just took me a while to really adopt the idea of being a multi-passionate entrepreneur. But I also didn't want to hang my hat on a concept that I'd only proven to myself once. And so October of 22, no, October of 21, my second book came out. And then March of 23, my third book came out. And each one of the books all had 200 plus reviews very quickly. My third book, I remember you and I were having dinner in New York with a group of friends in October of 23, 6 months after the third book came out. And I was lamenting in a first world problem kind of way that the book was stuck at 143 reviews, and I just wanted 151 so I could say over 150 without qualifying the statement. And you just looked at me and you said, "Why are you not a book launch coach?" And I was like, I think you've asked me that 3, maybe 4 times now in 7 years. And literally that sparked something, because I was in the middle of trying for a new idea. The Zoom revenue was definitely dipping. I didn't control the spigot around it. I couldn't decide whether people were going to have events and hire me. So I needed something that I could generate, and I had built for years that kind of network that was full of authors, but I needed to test it. So it was in November that I started testing that idea. December, I made a whole bunch more money than I had planned. I had to tell my accountant, and they were like, "Oh, you owe more in taxes." I'm like, "That's because I made more money." Like that makes sense. So that's really where the idea finally took root, and I experimented all of 24, and in the last 2 years, I've just built up a ton academic like around the ecosystem of it.
That's so interesting. With regard to the networking expert part, do you think that like what is your conclusion retrospectively? Is that something that is just a really hard category to monetize, or is it something that like you still kind of want to do in pieces, or like just what's your sort of retrospective conclusion about that and how that fits in?
Well, the way I think I'm using it today is networking with the outcome related to revenue, not just networking because you're trying to like mingle better. And so initially, I really was in the like, let me make you feel better about the way you're networking, or let me stop wasting time networking, stop hating networking. Like I had a lot of negative. I was trying to beat back the negativity, but the problem is, it's a problem people don't want to solve. They don't necessarily want to get better. But if you talk to someone who's already pretty good at networking, and they're looking for ways to amplify their effort and make more money or have a bigger impact because of their effort, that's the person who will hire you to achieve those results. And so for a while, I was finding those people through coaching clients. And then, I feel like you smacked me upside the head one more time. And I was like, oh, authors are at this moment in their journey, in their business, where they put a lot of effort into this book, and networking is what they can do to get the book out there effectively so they reach the people who need it, so the right people know they can help them so they can have a bigger impact. Like, oh, and like the problem is so clear to that author in that moment, and the solution doesn't seem completely out of step with reality, but it does seem like something they would need some support with or structure with. So me providing that turned out to be like, the yeses have been so easy. Like the product market fit has now been so easy. Whereas a decade ago, it was really uphill trying to find the audience for the skill set. I now have an audience that's ready for that skill set.
That makes a lot of sense. So I'm curious, Robbie, how the Zoom producer part during the pandemic ties in. Like how are you building on that, or how did that later impact you going into book launches?
What's interesting is that, again, it could feel very disparate, but my book launch strategy concludes with a virtual book launch party that I design, MC, and handle all the production of. And the goal of that book launch is to acknowledge the book launch process and how the book is done, but it's really forward facing to what comes next. And I talk to prospects in that very first call about the what comes next, and most of them can't really articulate the answer very well. And if they do have a clear understanding from the very beginning of the process, by the time we get to the launch party, they're speaking to a room full of prospects. I'm interviewing them. They have people come and speak about the experience of working with them and the value they provide, which all of that is great clips for after. But we conclude the launch party with a call to action, and having that design experience, understanding the possibilities, how to leverage a tool like a virtual space to have it be engaging and interesting, and to not just have one scene, just the trainer or even just me interviewing them the entire time, but to vary the scenes and to keep people's attention and to manage the chat conversations effectively so people don't feel ignored. So there's a tangible difference for people who are attending live,
When you
including
say vary the scene, what do you mean?
well, not just one image that we're staring at, like one presenter, or like right now, it's just two of us on screen, right? But we go from that to the author introduces the guest speakers, and we switch to a guest speaker, and then the author comes back on and says thank you and chooses the next guest speaker, and then I come on and we do the prize wheel, and then it's like then we just keep varying what's happening on screen. It's a cinematic design approach. It's more TV, right? It's not about the in person where you're in a room. It's you're bringing different aspects onto the screen, and the fact that I now understand that and can use and leverage that for the outcome, people stay around. Like at the very end of the entire program, we turn off all the spotlights and we just have a hangout with the author, which mimics the, well, it's time to pack up the room. People are stacking chairs around us and we're going to hang out and talk. People are still there. They want to stick around. And you and I both know that most people still think Zoom is this like exhausting thing, but when done well, it's a community enhancer, and it brings people together, and it leads to a lot more introductions and referrals and interest for the author, which is like the point of the whole launch exercise. So it's not vanity metrics and ego based. It's really like how to design with a specific outcome in mind. And the purpose first design is something that I really deeply investigated as a virtual event design consultant and executive Zoom producer. And I wrote about it in my third book. And I'm now applying that in this particular context.
Interesting. So let's get into the meat of this a little bit around launches. What do most authors get wrong about book launches?
I think the number one misconception for first time authors, whether they're going through a traditional publisher or they're an indie hybrid publisher type thing, is the focus on the bestseller status. And specifically, I think the focus on Amazon bestseller status, but I would even say the bigger lists, because there's a game to be played even with the bigger lists, which I don't play in at all. But you can organically arrive there, but most people are helping that along. But people who don't have access to be part of those bigger lists, they focus on winning at the Amazon bestseller category game. And they very proudly announce that they are a number one international bestselling author because they hit number one in one US and one Canadian category, probably selling less than 100 copies of their book. And they update their bio and their headline on LinkedIn and like their intro. And I have hit number one 37 times for 4 books across 4 countries. And I say it like that. I don't say number one international bestselling author, because I think what I did and what someone like Phil M. Jones did for his book, Exactly What to Say, are just not the same category of accomplishment. His book's been sold over 1 million times, dozens of translations, like that by every metric is an international bestselling book. It's an excellent book. It's a hybrid published book by our friends at Page Two, right? So it's a good book. It had a good launch and he had the right community. But I think that people are misunderstanding where to put their money and their energy. And even the publishers guide the authors to focus on the bestseller status. And one of my proudest accomplishments is that I now, in my network at the BizBook Pub Hub, we've really built an understanding where the publishers in the network understand that they had been doing that, but even they understood that it wasn't beneficial. It was just the thing that authors wanted. And I said, where else could you set the strategy based on what the client wants, as opposed to like, you're the expert, like that's not going to move the needle. So I have not gotten more money in the bank account because of those 37 number one best-selling ribbons. I think the thing we should focus on is reviews, specifically reviews from prospects and referral partners, because then you're building the pipeline from the book to the business, and every conversation you have creates an opportunity for either new revenue, new media introductions, et cetera. So I think the focus on vanity metrics over metrics that actually matter is the biggest sort of misconception for authors. And I feel like I'm on a mission to change the narrative, particularly amongst professional speakers and coaches who are using their books related to their business, because that's the audience that I really am speaking to.
Yeah, that's interesting, Robbie. I think that makes a lot of sense, and certainly the bestseller issue is one that can divert a lot of people's attention away from things that are probably more helpful in the end. I'm curious also about launch teams. You alluded to that before, and obviously that's pretty critical to the Amazon review strategy that you've talked about. In particular, you've talked about launch teams that are filled with potential referral partners or prospects. That seems like an interesting business development strategy. Talk to me about that.
Well, right, because if you get the memo that you should focus on reviews, but the way you do it is you pay a service to inauthentically and against Amazon rules get you reviews, that isn't actually going to help you in the same way I'm describing, because you'll get reviews, but you're not having the conversations, the people who would be lining up to then work with you or refer you. So when I think about who to invite onto the launch team, it really comes together based on the outcome. Like, what is the next offer? So I just got a chance to work with David Newman. He's the author of Do It Marketing. He just came with a new book called Market Eminence. It's his fourth book. When he first approached me to meet, I was like, why? Why do you need to, like, you're a marketing expert. Like, you've done this. You've got hundreds of reviews. But he actually went on record. We had a whole interview during his soft launch. And he talked about how much he focused initially on just getting the word out through partners for his first book. And reviews required a ton of energy and effort for years, and he did that in just like 5 weeks. He got 200 reviews because of my process and my team helping him with implementation. But to him, he was like, what is the next offer? Because he only had these big scale offers. He wanted to come something more for the individual. And so part of the conversation throughout the process was to really determine what would that be. And then during his launch party, he had people put a keyword in the chat if they wanted to know more about that. And he had 47 people do it. Now, are they all going to book time and hire him? Not really, but he has now 50 people to talk to, and he's probably going to fill a couple of cohorts at least to get a new offer started. That success wouldn't have been possible if he had just focused on reviews as a concept, not as a strategy. And so when I think about prospects, who would benefit personally from the message in the book and the offer that's related to it? And when I think about referral partners, who might know the people who would benefit? And we will, a third category of people to invite to your launch team, I would call sort of general supporters. They don't necessarily need the information for themselves or necessarily know the right people, but they're just advocates of yours and they would want to be up to date. And who knows, they could surprise you. But if we over index on the general supporters, we're not building the pipeline because like they don't know anyone. They don't know anyone to support you. So it's a little bit like the weak ties, strong ties piece as well. Like we've got to go further out and reach the people who continue to pass the message along.
That makes a ton of sense. Now, I've heard you say before that 50 is the kind of minimum threshold when it comes to Amazon reviews. Is that correct? And if so, why? What does it do? What happens when there's 50 Amazon reviews?
I just have to acknowledge that I'm being asked this question by someone who like blinks and sells 40 spots in your first pilot. um, I want to also say that you are not an ideal prospect for me because
Oh no.
you're living in a different world. Like you have a helicopter that lets ideas just take off. The people I'm reaching out to have little tiny planes that need long runways to kind of get momentum and build the runway to take off. And there are more of us, which is the good news, than there are of Dorie Clarks in the world and Phil M. Joneses in the world, right? But the concept is still true. Reviews are social proof on the book sales page. So studies have shown that more than 90% of buyers check reviews before making a purchase. And most books don't even have 20 written reviews. I mean, most books have less than, like, way, way under that. And I don't mean the 5-star, just the ratings, because like you can have lots of ratings, but I'm talking about the number of reviews. And one of the things I pride myself on is that the ratio in my books between ratings and reviews is very high. For my last 2 books, it's like 95%. And so like for my last book, there's 256 ratings and 252 reviews. And Laurie, you can check yours later. It's not 90 something percent. I will tell you that. I pulled yours up during an example. And your raw number of reviews is magical, right? You can have 300 reviews and 1,000 ratings. That's still really, really awesome. Most of us cannot accomplish that, but getting that for the human side is important. And then the AI algorithm side is for your book to be discoverable on the search results page based on your keywords, having a high quantity of reviews compared to other books, quality of the reviews, meaning the closer to 5 out of 5, the recency of the reviews. So you can't just get them all on day one. You have to continue to get reviews. And the last part is the percentage of verified purchase reviews, meaning someone bought your book before leaving a review on Amazon. All of that goes into the algorithm and gets your book high on the search results page. I was competing when my book first came out with a book that's called Book Launch. My book is called Launch Your Book. And that book had 911 written reviews and 2,000 or something ratings. But the book came out in 2015, and the last review was like 4 years ago. And so very quickly, my book got to the number one spot in the search results. So I'm behind basically a couple of ads, like there's some sponsored books, and then my book, and his book is now much further down. So even though I
Way
don't
to
have
go.
900 reviews, they're more recent, the book's more recent, like the algorithm is working for me, and ongoing reviews matter. So if you hadn't written a review for my book yet, you still can, and it will be helpful.
Fantastic. So, Robbie, you talked previously about the difference between the goal of a launch and the purpose of a
Mm.
launch. Can you talk a little bit more about that? What do you mean by that? What is the difference?
So this goes back to just underlining the point about reviews. Reviews give us the goal. The goal is to get 50 or more reviews. But the purpose is the conversations that happen with the people in your launch team during the review collection process. I have a exercise in my second book that I adapted in my fourth book called Wake Up Your Network. And so if the right people based on Waking Up Your Network are on the launch team, your book is serving a different kind of purpose than just being a book. Like you can imagine a book being a brick, and you worked really, really hard to produce this brick. It was a difficult thing, and you lift it up and take a selfie with it. You're very, very excited and proud, and your arms get tired. So you put it in the ground, you stand on it, and you feel a little taller, and you call people over to see it, and they all look at it, admire it. It's so wonderful. But life moves on pretty quickly, and you step off the brick to go about just every day. The brick is just sitting there being a brick. But if the brick was just sitting there propping open the door between you and a prospect, or between you and a referral partner, and every conversation you had during the launch sequence was pushing that door a little wider, suddenly there'd be no barrier between you and that other person, and they'd be inviting you to collaborate. Then your book is actually that business asset, not just a product. And that is the purpose of the launch. So I have one client who got like only, I don't know, he had trouble. He had issues with Amazon. He had to collect reviews for Barnes and Noble. He got about 30 reviews, which I think some people would be like, oh gosh, he hired you and you only got 30 reviews. But he got five new contracts. So he's very happy. That is the point.
That is a good moral to the story. So you run something called Author ROI Lab. So what is that about? Like who is that for? You were talking earlier about tragically, I am not a fit for you, but who is?
Yeah, for me, it's these entrepreneurial authors that are writing books to help them grow their business, that are expecting the book to do more for them. I will say that the people who've been most interested are often people working on their second book who through the experience of the first book realized the book should have done more, and had some lessons learned, or people who know those kinds of colleagues. And so they're like, oh, I want to make sure that like that doesn't happen to my book. And so it's people who have a greater awareness of the problem, because initially the problem is, how do I write this book? I can't get these ideas out of my head, right? Like, so if you're past the fear of the writing and now you're thinking about, well, who is this book for? Who is it not for? Well, what problems they know they have as they come into the book? How am I going to expose them to the bigger problem that they need to be aware of, and the solutions that I can offer, and me being a trusted guide? Like, how do I track them through this process? And so I just think that so many people rush to publish a book because that was the mantra I heard in an NSA, a National Speakers Association, was you need a book, you need a book, you need a book. And when the book came out, one of the other memorable moments with you was my book came out and I saw you for an event, and I said, I'm thinking about doing some sort of like online program or something related to my book, and I'm hoping for some kind of like sage advice or guidance from you. And you said, you're going to learn a lot. which I did. And I wrote about everything I learned in my second book because it was such a back and forth process. And I thought, what if I'd done all that work first? And what if I had tested these assumptions with real people first and actually had people waiting for all of this and maybe even piloted the offer before I published the book? Like, my gosh, I would have saved so much. So that's who the book, the Author ROI Lab, is for people who want to create a real plan for first figuring out whether the book is even worth it, and then second, actually developing the revenue streams and the concepts so the book fits in. I think you'll feel better knowing the outcome that's possible. It will lead you to want to invest more financially and time wise into the book to create a really good book. When you don't really know that, then it's easy to just let the book be good enough and not serve that purpose.
Yeah, that's really interesting. I want to dig more into something you just said, which is helping authors know if the book actually should be written. Can you touch on that a little bit more? What do you
Yeah,
mean by that, and how do you help them excavate that question?
it's like helping an author zoom out before they dive in, because they often come to me very excited about a very specific concept, but it's not really a business decision. It's an emotional decision. And often the book they want to write is the one they want to write. It's not tied to a book that they know people are clamoring for. So, like sometimes the book they want to write is book two, because the book one, which is the more foundational content, they're kind of bored with that topic. But that's actually the entry point. The entry point is that book one. And they need to, so it's really taking a breath and testing some assumptions. It's basically a workbook. It's that we meet, over 8 weeks, 4 times. There's homework in between. Part of the homework is actually meeting with people and having research calls. But it's identifying the who it's for, who it's not for, like what problem it's solving, trying to get as clear. The other thing I think I'm trying to help people do is not write these 350-page books that solve 19 problems, but writing the 150-page book, 5 by 8, easy to read, easy to act on. Volume 2 comes out, volume 3 comes out, volume 4 right? Like, build a pathway for people rather than a big book that people aren't going to feel most of it speaks to them in that moment. They aren't going to want to keep reading it. They're not going to pick it up again when it's time to. They're going to forget you exist. So it's like, how do we reimagine this offering in a way that gives people that on ramp and just creates the business behind it so that they're thinking about what comes next and they're testing that. When my second book came out, or I was about to, I ran like 13 2-hour pop-up masterminds where people paid $100, and 2 weeks before the mastermind, they got access to my Wake Up Your Network PDF workbook piece. And I got so much great feedback about how to make that a better text, because when you're coaching, you tell people steps 1, 4, 7, and 10, and then you have a conversation about the in between. But in a book, I had to write 1A, 1B, 1C, 2A, 2B, 2C, and like I didn't fully grasp that until I had that feedback. So by building that plan, I just got better feedback and yeah, it better results. So this is the kind of plan and forward I'm trying to help for other people.
I love that, Robbie. That's great. So I'm curious, also going back to the question about the connective tissue with all this. In the last few years, you have launched a lot of things. I have a
Yeah.
list here, so I'm going to remind myself of all this. So of course, there's the podcast. We're celebrating the 500th episode here.
Yeah.
There's the expert directory. There's Kindle flash sales that you do. You've got community networking events. You have your fourth book. So this is a lot of stuff. How do you see all of those pieces fitting together?
Each one of them is there because there was a perceived problem. Um, I saw people were having, entrepreneurial authors were having, and I wanted to find ways for us to have a resource, ecosystem to help them wherever they were on their author journey. And that it's not just what I do. I'm very, community oriented. Relationships are sort of a core way I approach this. And so if I have a really good Rolodex, right? If I can be a concierge and direct people to really qualified people, qualified vendors and experts, then I feel like I'm doing my job. Even if you can't hire me right now, I if you do eventually come back to me, you're going to be in a much better space to get great results. And so the BizBook Pub Hub grew slowly, like a lot of experimentation. You and I met back when I was running Socializing for Justice. And that was a meetup group that I ran for 11 years, grew to thousands of members. And it was very iterative. It was like build, get out of the way, reflect, build, get out of the way, reflect. And I feel like BizBook Pub Hub has had a lot of the same cadence where we're testing things out. So I'm hosting monthly events and they're free because I want authors to hang out with authors. And then I host another event the following month that's for speakers through NSA Philadelphia, because speakers need to hang out with speakers. And the Venn diagram between speakers and authors in my world is a circle. so, so providing spaces where people can do peer-to-peer connections been really important to me. Layering on the community of the experts has been wonderful. The collaborations among them. The podcast is a great way to illustrate the author journey and share lots of voices. And so it's, again, not just saying like, this is my advice, but then collectively, what are we learning from each other? And the Kindle flash sales are just really fun. Right after you and I talked about this idea in October 23, Black Friday was coming up 2 weeks before Black Friday in November. I got really excited about this idea of building an author sort of cross promotion thing that I had toyed with the idea in 2018, actually. And at that time, I did a little survey, and I think only 2 of like 23 people were going to give me more than like $0. So I didn't have the machine around it. And now it's just been wonderful. People pay a small fee. I'm teaching them marketing concepts. They're collaborating with each other. There are also people who already have a book who are my ideal prospects, because if they write book 2, or if they know someone who wants to write a book, then they know me and they know my work. And 3 times a year we organize that. So it's just been responding to the problems that I see people facing, and then looking for a community solution for each one of them.
That's really cool. And let's hone in for a moment on community. You made a very conscious decision to not just sell things, sell services, or sell products. You are wrapping it in a layer of community. Can you talk about that and why that is important?
Yeah, I mean, part of what I love about National Speakers Association, the thing that I mainly talk about when people ask me whether, joining is worth it, is the people. And when you and I first met, I was a fundraising professional, and I was part of the Association of Fundraising Professionals. And I even organized one of their conferences one year, and I spoke at their conferences, and I volunteered at their events, right? So I was very involved. And when I left my day job, my career, with your help, it was an intervention there. At the end of 2014, I did some research, found right away that there was an association of professional speakers, and I joined in January of 2015. So I just thought, well, I could wait 10 years and then join, or I could get really involved for 10 years and see if that was worth it. It's kind of almost funny, but it's also, that's how you get value. And I just passed, I'm now in my 11th or 12th year. So I've now, I've been doing this for over a decade, and it is really the people, and it's the showing up over and over and over again. And the stuff that I learned were often to questions I didn't even know to ask. So being in a space of peers who are going through similar experiences, or maybe a little further ahead sometimes, or maybe you're a little further ahead and you can help others, that is just magic. But it's really hard when you're first getting started to know where to invest that money and time, and what resources are worth it. There's a lot of predatory people in the publishing world. So how do you avoid that? And what questions do you ask before you saying yes to a contract? Our first person who signed up as one of our hub partners is an attorney. So I love that we have an IP attorney that we can point people to when they have questions. So this is the kind of stuff that, if you're in a space regularly and building relationships with other people, you're going to help each other along this journey. This is a rising tides kind of idea. And I feel like my reach is just exponentially more, because I'm not trying to track every dollar that's made in the hub to me. It's a community effort. And I feel like we really are in our own little corner of the publishing world, changing the narrative about what is success in the world of a book coming out related to a business. And that in 2 years, I feel like we've already started to really make that real dent in that. And a decade later, like the power of this is going to be just amazing. So I think, to me, creating the Kindle flash sale, genius author space there, the author events, the community of experts, that's about me getting out of the way and letting it continue to grow.
That's so cool. I really love the sentiment behind that. I think that makes a ton of sense. So that begs the question, Robbie, what's next? You're 500 episodes in. What's the next mountain, man?
I know. This is the problem with great achievements is people immediately are like, "Oh, that was a great book. What's the next one?" And you're like, "Oh man, I'm still going through the pains of the first one." Well, one, I will say that this is a really busy start to 2026, more than I had even anticipated. A lot of authors had started their launches with me in late fall, like David Newman, where he was collecting his reviews with the Kindle book release. Paperback came out in 2026. The launch party was in January. In 1 week in January, I had 2 launches, his and another one, and then including launch parties. And then another person didn't have a party, but they had a launch day, all in the same week. So there's just been frenzied. The good news is that the right referrals are coming in. I love that, like, I keep seeing people going to booklaunchbrainstorm.com, filling out the form, getting on a call with me, wherever they are on their journey, whether they're thinking about writing a book, have a book, somewhere in between. I want to have a conversation with them, because if they're just getting started, the Author ROI Lab could be a really good fit, or even the questions I ask them could help them think differently about the project they're about to undergo. So for me, it's just been trying to level up. So I hired a new team member, so the onboarding of clients is smoother. Creating lots more templates of all the communication I have with clients. I honestly, as I look back, I'm like, how did I do it without all these systems in place? This past month has been about cleaning up and creating systems and onboarding a new person to help me manage that. But the experience is only going to get better for the client and smoother for me. And so for me, it's about impact. So I want to just keep meeting people where they are and encouraging them to write the book that's going to change their life and the lives of all those other people. And of course, community is going to continue to be a core group of that. The BizBook Pub Hub, our monthly events, the podcast. I mean, I don't know, no major announcements or milestones here. I feel like I'm gonna officially say no books coming out this year from me. I like when you came out with your last book, you're like, there's a 5-year gap. I'm not gonna try to rush to the next thing. I'm gonna really lean into this one because I feel like there's more and more people who need it, and I need to keep the focus, not get excited by the next shiny object, which is so tempting. But I have plenty to work with.
You do indeed, Ravi. It's been so great getting to dive deep with you and hear a little
Thanks.
bit more about the arc of your journey, reinventing you, and all of the incredible things that you've been doing with BizBook Pub Hub.
Thank you so much, Dorie. I appreciate you being here. You're the perfect person to witness and be part of this experience. Thank you for all your encouragement. For those who don't know, I dedicated my 4th book to Dorie. I've said this before. There are 2 women who've had an outsized influence on my life. I married one of them. The other is Dorie Clark. Say hi to your wife for me. All right. See you later, everyone.